Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Online, the podcast where we talk all things periods. I'm Megan.
And I'm Bokang.
And this is our very last episode.
Girl, I'm so sad.
I know.
High key. I thought I could play it cool, but I'm like, oh no, it's the end.
Yeah, no, we're saving the tears for the blooper rolls.
Yeah.
It's in here. So this is an exciting episode, I guess, because we're talking about one of our favorite things, which we love to do.
Yeah, mythbusting. And we're talking about it with one of our favorite people. We started the journey with her and we're ending it with you too, Fatima Kathrada. If you guys are here on episode 1, you already know her. But if you're new here, Fatima is a lecturer, pharmacist, and women's health advocate and researcher. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. I am really excited to get this conversation going about mythbusting.
Cool. And what is the importance of myth-busting, Fatima?
I think, in today's day and age, there is so much of information out there on social media, and I think it's very important for us to be able to decipher between what's accurate information and what isn't.
Okay.
And that is what platforms like this are there for.
And I mean, this episode, like all the other episodes, has been made possible by the amazing questions that have been asked on the platform.
Yeah, and I think speaking of, we can get right into our first myth. Well, our first question, and we'll see, myth or not. So our first question, Fatima, is what to do if I have an odor during my periods?
Okay, so that's a very good question and a very frequent question. And ideally, an odor is not always a bad thing, okay? Remember that when you're looking at any type of odor during your period, okay, it's important to decipher, okay, is it something I need to be concerned about or not? Okay, it's not supposed to be smelling rosy and sweet, okay? These are your normal bodily functions. So ideally, if you smell something more on the lines of a metallic smell, something almost like a copper coin, okay, that very much indicates the iron in your blood, and that's perfectly normal.
Makes sense.
But alarming signs would be if, for example, you see a rotten smell. So a rotten smell may indicate a foreign body. So, for example, a tampon that may have been left in for too long. Another sign would be if you have a very strong fishy odor, that could indicate any type of infection. And so when you have those type of odors, then you should seek medical attention.
Okay, makes total sense.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you actually really differentiated that. Listen, it's not supposed to smell like roses, fruit, flower, and, having just that natural. A vagina is supposed to smell like a vagina.
Right.
Exactly, yes.
But there is really a line where if you have that fishy smell or if it's like rotten, really alarming, like you need to get that checked out because it could be something else.
So B, I'm so glad you said that, right? Because like you said, a vagina is supposed to smell like a vagina.
Exactly.
And maybe, Fatima, are people just hyper aware of their own bodily odors?
I think they are. And I think that's why we need to advocate for understanding what is normal and what is not. And particularly when it comes to, for example, your period, you know your body. So if every month you have a slight smell when you have your period, it generally isn't anything of concern. Unless, like as we've discussed, the strongest smells, that's when you would be alarming. But other than that, if it's a normal odor, and also a very good indicator is some of these smells might prolong or progress beyond your period. And that would be an indicator, okay, perhaps there is some type of underlying infection. So that's a good marker as well if it progresses further after your period.
Right. Okay. And I mean, would like very strong odors, for instance, be accompanied by any other symptoms?
Yes.
Okay.
So you may have some pain in your abdomen. Okay. You may have any type of discomfort when urinating, whether it be burning on urination, pain on urination, difficulty on urination, lower back pain, and then obviously an associated discharge, which may or may not be discolored.
Okay. And besides going to the Lil-Lets Talk platform and, maybe asking a question or bringing it up with someone, is it best to go to a doctor?
It is. Remember that if you're unsure, rather get it checked up and get medical advice, because we do say that if you do have an infection, it's always best to have it treated as soon as possible.
Okay, cool. Well, let's launch into question 2, right?
Yeah, I think we can consider that one myth busted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So, can I wash my vagina with soap or body wash? Good question.
Very good question. And I think a lot of women are very obsessed with the fact that I have to wash my vagina with soap. Okay, ideally it's recommended that we should just merely wash with water. So water is sufficient. Okay. However, if you feel that you still need to use some type of a soap, it's advisable to use the mildest type of soap or a soap-free wash. So, for example, the Lil-Lets has a soap-free, paraben-free, intimate wash. So those are the safest. Remember, when you use any type of soaps or that are very harsh, it may cause some type of irritation. They also then interfere with the pH balance in your vagina, and that can lead, obviously, to overgrowth of infections, for example. Okay. So keep it simple, water or your mildest or soap-free options.
Right. And I think like just wash thoroughly. I think like a lot of people, you know, think that we need to use soap and whatever, but just have a thorough wash. But you know, I think what we also need to differentiate is the fact that you shouldn't be going anywhere near the entrance of your vagina, right?
That's
like
correct.
you need to wash your vulva, your labia, and like just
nothing on the inside. That is absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay, cool.
And this conversation about like soap and body wash, I think it's like a hot topic or something a lot of people speak about. And there's just, it goes back to this pressure, I think, and this insecurity, and like you said before, this confidence issue about smelling a certain way. But I love how we've just really just set the record straight of water is enough. And also, like you said, there's specific products. If you really feel like you need to use that soap body wash, there are specific ones to use that won't upset your pH or, you know, anything else like that.
That's correct. Perfect.
Yeah, and we're really just flying through these questions. And this next one, I'm super interested to hear your opinion on. Fatima, what causes a yeast infection? Like, where do yeast infections come from? I think let's start there.
Okay, so very important. So just to break it down from the basis. So yeast infection ideally is a fungal type of infection. Okay, and most commonly those associated with vagina are what we call your candida type infections. Okay, and they can occur due to a number of reasons. So number one, if you have a hormonal imbalance, those that, for example, are taking any type of hormonal contraceptive that have a higher content of estrogen are at a higher risk of a yeast infection. Those that have underlying conditions. So, for example, if you have uncontrolled diabetes, you're at a higher risk of developing a yeast infection. Many women will see that when they're on a course of an antibiotic, so usually your broad spectrum antibiotics, they would encounter a yeast infection. And then obviously also any type of immunosuppressant condition. So patients with HIV, for example, or any underlying condition that suppresses your immune system. So that means that your body is actually not working optimally to be able to fight these infections. And so then you end up with a yeast infection.
And what can be done to avoid it? Because, yeah, it seems like there's different things that could, you know, lead to getting one. What can we do to avoid it in each circumstance?
So we need to understand that yeast infections or your fungal infections, they thrive in moist, damp areas. Okay? So that is why it's important to keep the area dry, okay, clean, so good hygiene, right? Very importantly is to make sure that you avoid wearing very tight-fitting clothing. Okay, breathable underwear is the best. Okay, so breathable cotton underwear is usually the best in terms of preventing these type of infections. And we spoke about the damp, moist area. So a lot of women will see that if you go to the gym, if you went for a swim, as soon as you're done, try to get out of those clothes as quickly as possible, to prevent staying in that moist, damp environment, which obviously harbors the growth of these type of infections. And then for those that are taking antibiotics, we usually encourage you to only take an antibiotic unless it is necessary. Okay, we do come across many women who like to self-medicate, okay? And this is one of the problems, that you will get recurrent yeast infections. But if you do have to take an antibiotic, it's always good to use a probiotic as prophylaxis. So during the time that you're actually taking the antibiotic, to supplement with a probiotic to prevent a yeast infection. And then if you have any underlying conditions, like we spoke about diabetes or immunosuppressive conditions, to keep those conditions controlled. So keep the immunity up, okay, as best as you can, healthy diet, increase liquids, decrease sugary foods. And if you have diabetes, for example, a controlled diabetic is much safer than one that is uncontrolled. So I think if you understand where it comes from, okay, it's easy for you to then look at how do I prevent it. These infections are quite not disabling, but they really do cause a lot of inconvenience for women, and they become very self-conscious about it. So I think these questions are very valid, and we need to answer them in a way that women know when to seek help. And what's normal and what's not.
Okay, well, let's go on to our last question. I can't believe it. And I think this just gets to the absolute heart of this series. How do we normalize talking about periods?
Very important. Very, very important. And, you know, Megan, we're in a day and age where there is still so much of stigma surrounding menstruation and periods. And it's sad that we're still at this place. And number one, to start normalizing a period or menstruation is for us to start speaking about it honestly, truthfully, and openly. And when I say speak about it, I mean that we need to speak about it on all levels. Speak about it in your workplace, speak about it at home, speak about it with your friends, speak about it with your colleagues, your family. And even at home, it should involve both genders. We usually isolate these topics and only speak about it to your daughters. And I think we need to start speaking about it to your sons too. And I'll give you a very good reason for this. Tomorrow, your son, when he comes into contact with a girl who might have soiled her clothes because she had an unexpected period, you want him to be the son that will go up and support her rather than mock her and ridicule her. You know, and I think that's where the space comes in terms of the role of men and the responsibility of men in helping us to really break the stigma, to start speaking about it openly with other women amongst themselves as men, you know, and to really become our allies and to really stand up and support women. Because it's a normal physiological process. It's something that we cannot deny. It's something that we cannot hide away from. It's something that we cannot stop. It's going to occur every single month in every woman. And so we need to come to terms with it, that just like with all other bodily functions, this is just a bodily function. And we need to really open up conversations about it, that it's okay to talk about it, you know. And when I say talk about it, we also need to be very careful about the language we use, for example. So we need to start using inclusive language when we talk about menstruation and periods. We need to start speaking about it positively. Yes, there are negative connotations, there are medical conditions associated with your menstruation, your period, but we need to start talking about it positively.
And I think what also made me realize is how often I can take for granted that this is a very stigmatized topic still, because you are in communities, we are in communities where we really just openly talk about this, but that's not the case for everyone. And I think at the end of the day, the responsibility kind of relies on the individual. If you want to see that effective change, just take up that responsibility and know that it starts with you normalizing those conversations, whether it is, at home with your parents, your brothers, sisters, with your friends. If you're listening to this is your sign to destigmatize and have those open conversations.
Yes, most definitely. I think we have to, and we might be in an environment where your child might know who to go to when they have their first period. But more often than not, we have little girls who are receiving their first period and they don't know what to do. They don't know who to turn to, because it's a topic that you shouldn't talk about, and we really need to start breaking those barriers and say it's okay. It's normal and we all go through it. And as soon as we get to that point where it's a normal topic of conversation between both men and women, in families, in public spaces, I think we can really, address this issue of not just the the myths and the misinformation around it, but also access. Then women will freely come up in terms of speaking about access to these products, and then also underlying conditions. It starts off with the taboo and the stigmas around just menstruation, and then it progresses into medical conditions where women are shy away and they feel ashamed to speak about medical conditions that involve their menstruation in any way. So it really has a ripple effect, detrimental effect, and it just continues to get worse. And so we need to target it from the basis. Start talking about menstruation, and that will open up doors for women to be able to talk about access, about medical conditions, and all that follows from the menstruation.
That actually reminded me, one of our previous guests, Ponso, had said, I think we were talking about tampons. And she said, with all these stigmas and that around things like tampons and periods and that, it can actually be deadly, right?
Yeah.
Because like if someone is scared to talk about their period, they might be scared to get a pap smear, for instance, and they might not get, cervical cancer diagnosis, for instance.
Yes.
So it's just quite scary that like the power that misinformation has.
It is. And, we see it as health professionals. You might get a girl who's so scared, and they'd come in and they'd have a problem with their menstrual cycle or their menstruation, and they'd come to you in a way where they'd actually be whispering to you to make sure that not a soul must hear that they have a problem with their menstruation. And it just shows, the stigmas we've placed on these. And it's a heavy burden for a woman to really carry with them. It's a normal bodily process, and it shouldn't be this way. So yes, we really need to start opening up these conversations.
I mean, it's bizarre, right? Like you'll openly talk about potty training your kid, but you somehow can't talk about your period.
Exactly.
Like, physiological, like you said, bodily functions.
Exactly.
And it's just shrouded in this like secrecy and shame and
Yeah.
And I like to think that we're in an enlightened space here where we're more empowered perhaps with the information that we need. But I mean, I've learned something on every single episode of this series.
Every single one. And I think there's no better way to just have ended off the episode than with you, Fatima.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. We are here to educate. We are here to advocate and to really, like the topic says, to just debunk these myths and to provide a safe haven for women to know where to find the correct and accurate information. And I think, part of falling within that educational stream of breaking the stigmas is we need to make this information freely available and provide resources and access to correct and accurate information.
And I think I'd just like to reiterate that Lil-Lets Talk is a free online platform. It's a safe space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we need to keep telling people about it.
Definitely.
Because I think it's such an incredible resource. And just being on there, I mean, as a responder myself, I feel like I learn something every day.
Yeah.
With people's questions. And if we can keep like collating spaces like that and curating
Most definitely.
environments like this.
To give them a space to turn to, most definitely.
And Fatima, if people want to, follow you, find out more about your work, where can they do that?
Okay, so my handle is at Fatima Kathrada or at Women's Health by FK. And we post regularly evidence-based information regarding all medical conditions related to women's health.
Amazing.
Awesome. Girl, here comes the part that I don't want to happen.
We said no tears, right? No tears.
Yeah, no tears, but still heavy hearts as we come to the end of this episode.
And the end of the season.
Yeah.
But maybe see you for season 2.
Maybe. There's only one way to find out, guys. Just keep watching. But also, before we close out and say bye to everyone, I think, Lil-Lets Talk online, as much as season 1 is coming to an end, the conversations are evergreen. They're always relevant. So guys, make sure to share, keep watching, catch up on all the other episodes if you've missed. Do yourself a favor, okay? Not only are they entertaining conversations, but they're enlightening. And this is a safe space where you guys can have your questions answered. You can be seen with people who are experts, knowledgeable, and can guide you in the right way. And people like me who are like, wow, I need to learn. This is the place to do that.
Oh, B, it's been great. So this may be the end of the season, but as you said, content is evergreen.
Yeah.
It's on our YouTube channels. It's on social media. And follow Lil-Lets if you haven't yet on social media. And please, if you have any more questions, remember that Lil-Lets Talk is a safe, online, free space where you can have any of your questions about periods, puberty, pregnancy, and everything in between answered. And hopefully we see you there.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.